Good morning, beloveds. Good morning. Good, happy spring. We are at that fulcrum in our physical world where yesterday we according to the calendar and according to the cosmos and the moon, that we crossed that portal from winter to spring. And how glad we are. Good morning. So last month, I introduced this topic of integrating that part of us that is always acting and wants to take action, is reacting, with the mystic. And they seem to be two parts of a fulcrum, two parts of a continuum, two parts of a range of our options of how we show up in the world. Now, as I mentioned, yesterday was the equinox, the vernal equinox. And it talks about, it doesn't talk, but it represents a point of balance in our world. That point of balance from the darkest, the shortest daytime and the longest nighttime, all the way over to the longest day and the shortest nighttime. So we go from the start of winter to the start of summer, and yesterday was that balance point of equal light and equal darkness. And it also represents, we can think of it as a fulcrum, as a balance point in other ways. So we have that in our physical realm, and it was a bright, sunny day. The temperatures are creeping up. We can feel that resurgence, that energy that wants to come up from the earth and express in new growth, in reemergence, in new building. And we are so glad that that dark coldness is behind us. And we have lots of brightness to look forward to. That is the physical realm that we are attuned to, that we have evolved into. But we're always on a balance, not just at the equinox. When we think in terms of composition, artistically and otherwise, there is a form of balance where it's equal, and there's a form of balance that may be sort of lopsided, or we might think of it as extreme. And I'm going to dig into this more as we go. Because our life is always ebbing and flowing. And we know from Ernest Holmes, the founder of this teaching, that life is about change. I know I focus on change quite a bit, but when are we not changing? I mean, even going from winter to spring, we see that physical manifestation in our outer world of how the trees have gone from being completely bare to now starting to bud, at least on my street. And I'm noticing it elsewhere as well. So we have an ebb and flow, and we have a balance in our life. How much cold is there? How much hot is there? How much sun is there? How much rain is there? And we have balance points and differences in how we choose to balance in our life as well. So we can also think of this balance point about how much do we focus on action versus how much do we personally go within and seek guidance, have that intuitive connection, and let that be the focus of our life. So some people are very extremely action-oriented, some are very inner. We even have words for that, like extrovert, introvert, right? Those who are big and bold and those who are more passive, right? And we have also some balance points, because we're always at a choice point. We're always sort of balancing the pros and cons of choice and consequence. And so some of us do, know when we go off balance, and that becomes a calibration. Do we know it soon enough to rebalance and sort of stay in an equilibrium most of the time? We're told, for example, that airplanes, as they're flying, that they don't just take a straight path, that they're constantly doing these little course corrections to stay and reach their destination, to stay on path and reach their destination. But it's not just a solid arc. And that is true for us as well, that sometimes we're very exuberant and other times more quiet. But that's part of the juice of life, and it's part of, excuse me for a moment. It's just part of how we are present and responding and present with ourselves. Now, when we get our balance too far out of balance, we talk about being at extremes. And so we notice in the world or notice even in ourselves, when we're having an extreme reaction, or extreme expression, right? And so let's remember that we are always, as part of our personality, as part of our presence, someplace on that range. And integration is the fulcrum. Integration is that balance point. So sometimes we're too much head, as I said, and too much on the mystic, but we can come into balance when we integrate and blend those two. So let's dig a little bit deeper on balance as integration. Let's use dance as an analogy. When two people are dancing, sometimes they're far apart and they're off in their own orbit, and they may even have, be dancing differently. And then there are times when these two people in a dance come together, are very entwined, are in a great embrace, and they move with each other. That's a different, right, of responding, of being present and being in harmony, being in expression, and being as a form of balance. Einstein told us we cannot change or solve a problem with the same mindset that created that problem. In Science of Mind, we've sort of appropriated that and changed that to we can't solve problems with the same consciousness with which they were created. And we have to remember that problems are always in what we call the condition. They are always the after effect of some prior choice and some level of consciousness. And so when we are confronted and when we are presented with and when we encounter something in our life that we feel, oh, this has to change, whether it's a balance or a correction, this has to change. We go out of balance a bit when we go straight to action and don't really blend in that guidance that the mystic has to offer. So a lot of times when we do that, not a lot of times, always when we do that, we are working in the condition and we are out of balance with that guidance that is divinely rooted, can bring to what's going on. So our other option then is to bring some integration to this. And by that I mean to more consciously recognize and choose, there's something here that's going on. And I am choosing to change it, or maybe it is prompting me to change, forcing me to change. Now, we all went through this past year. We have all experienced extreme change from the outside. And where we came into balance was where we could find resilience, where we could find ways to engage and belong to each other despite the isolation. And where we were challenged, that we could step back into our faith, into that connection with God that we know we all inherently have, and bring that into how we chose to respond. So I want to talk about that mystic. Who is the mystic? Where is that coming from? The mystic is that part of us going back to that recognition that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I refer to the mystic as that part of us that recognizes and understands we are a divine being. We are each this magnificent and unique expression of God. There's divine value and worth in all of us, and there is always that connection with that source from which we have come. We know that this is a power and presence that is greater than anything else. It is the absolute wisdom, the absolute power that is infinite and eternal and is everywhere present, everywhere active, and waiting for us to engage it. So that mystic is the part of us who has that understanding, values that connection, and chooses to start there before we act. That's how we integrate, is that we up-level that understanding, we up-level our embrace of that, and we up-level our self-definition in that way. That we have this spectrum that we can call upon and utilize. And it's up to us to decide that blend of that mystic and let it guide, should we choose, our action. For we know that when we do, as Ernest Holmes says, that helps us to understand and reframe instead of acting against, reacting. How can we reframe that as something we are for, that is pulling at our heart, that is inspiring us, and through that inspiration guides our action in our life and in the world? And so, as we think about where we are in this moment, stepping just a day past the equinox and that perfect balance, that place, when I think of that balance point, it is that place, as I say, where doing and being are one and the same. What a remarkable balance that is. And it doesn't have to be static. It can still be expressing, but it is that perfect entanglement and dance of the activist and the mystic. So let's know this together. In every moment, we are co-creating in our lives. We are choosing, and we can choose to up-level how we are co-creating with God. We can remember that we are always partnered with that greatest wisdom, power, and grace. That power and grace in which there is an answer and a solution to everything we are faced with. That we can choose to develop that greater connection with our own mystic, almost as if we are dancing, embracing, and that entanglement of roots of that consciousness being our consciousness. We can choose to invite our inner mystic into the dance, into what we are facing in life. And invite that inner mystic to be part of our decision process of what we are choosing, knowing that we are always co-creating. Even if we forget it, we are. But we have the option to remember that. And by doing so, we are empowering ourselves, remembering that we are partnering with that greatest power. And so we can choose to more gracefully and yet more joyously, exuberantly navigate our way through life. This is how we forge a new way, a new path. This is how, going back to Einstein, we can bring forward a new solution. And so, welcome to our brave new spring. Welcome to that beautiful balance. Welcome, your inner mystic. Namaste.